I'm live. It's the Nazarite, bringing you Hebrew lore from days of yore. My doggie's here. She might come into the frame. At any rate, hi. So, this week's Torah portion is Naso, lift up. And it's the one which obviously contains the Nazarite laws, but I'm not going to talk about that. It's part of what this channel is about, but I do that a lot of other times, so I'm not going to do it this time. The thing I want to talk about right now is a little bit before the laws of the Nazarite, there is a commandment to send out of the camp, to send away from the camp, three figures: the leper, and I'm talking biblical leprosy, not the modern day disease, and someone who is afflicted with a discharge of some kind, a defiling disease, skin disease of some kind, and those who are unclean because of a dead body. Now we know that the first two, the leper and the one suffering from the skin disease having to do with discharge, those two things, according to tradition, I mean, sure, it's a physiological thing. It happens. Sometimes the body is attacked, but the idea is that these were this was, let's say, something you would get, right, to put you back on the straight and narrow after you've done something wrong. Obviously, people get sick all the time. These kinds of diseases where something is gushing out of you or something is covering you, whatever the case is, these skin diseases were indicative of different things that were going on in your spirit, in your soul, in your mind, whatever the case is. The third one, which is being defiled by a human corpse, by a dead body, that's something that is kind of the natural circle of life. It's not necessarily that you did something which requires realignment of some kind, you know. I mean, it's said that the biblical leprosy comes for wagging your tongue, you know what I mean? Speaking ill of others, gossiping, using your tongue in a way which is disrespectful, and I mean that in a very kind of harsh way. So you would have to sort of get your act together, and you would get leprosy to help guide you back on the straight and narrow. Or again, the disease where your skin is something is gushing out of you to, again, it indicates something else, more spiritual or metaphysical, perhaps, that was gushing out of you. Something having to do with blood, which is judgment, which is red, which is your very life. A lot of things in there. The third one, however, is being defiled by a dead body. And any Israelite, except for the high priest, would be defiled, and, well, the Nazarite, would be defiled by a dead body at some time. They would have to go to a funeral. Something would happen inadvertently. That could happen either way, to a priest or a Nazarite. The point I'm trying to make is that it's something which is the part of the natural circle of life. And it's something that you're cast away for, right? If you were defiled by a dead body, you are purified on the third day and on the seventh day, and only then can you re-enter the camp. Also, unlike other sins, it's not that you're sent away from one of the camps, like the tabernacle or the Levitical priestly camp or the tribal camp. No, it's everything. You're outside of the perimeter. You're the outside. So, and this again has many different teachings in it, and why that happens and how it happens, and the numbers and the sacrifices. It's all a lot. But what I want to talk about right now is doing something wrong. That's one thing, or two things out of the three figures. Two of them are seemingly they did something wrong. You know, whatever the nature of that is to you. Take it however you want. Something was out of whack, out of line. They needed to realign, find a balance. And this manifested physically through these two things: leprosy and the gushing, whatever, skin disease. But death is something that happens. You don't have a choice about whether about whether there is death. There is death in the world. It's part of what happened after Eden, to us people. And it's something that is a natural part of life. You could make you could make the argument, well, no. Let's just say that those two first things are things that you brought on yourself pretty much fully. And I'm just I'm using a broad generalization. And the third thing is something that you have no control over. Somebody died. You happened to be there. You're defiled. End of story. You got to purify yourself and only then come back. Something you don't have control over. How do we treat those who are defiled? I know that when it comes to religion, and I'm talking about like organized religion, not faith or way of life. I'm talking about religion, set of rules. There's a bar here. Come and join us, because there's that aspect of religion which I know. Wait, am I cool? Am I all right? Okay. There's that part of religion, a very strict kind of, orthodoxy, for lack of a better term. I don't know. Well, yeah, for lack of a better term. And there are times when you need to cast away people, even though they did nothing wrong. They are in an impure, unclean state. And again, this is a physical impurity that is temporary and that's natural, but is nonetheless defiling. I mean, there are so many things that people who follow the Torah to the T, and I don't consider myself to be one of them. You know, I mean, it was Pride. There was the Pride. Well, not parade. The Pride March. Well, I guess it was a parade, but march in Jerusalem the other day. I think 2 days ago. The gay community is something I don't know anything about, and I don't. I'm not part of that community, but I know I can fathom at least why they would want to march. I get it. I do. So many religious figures, and I'm talking about Orthodox, Judaism, not religion at large. Right now, I'm just talking about what I know. I think so many are quick to send them away from the camp, and the reason I bring up gays is because the question of sexual orientation is: do you I mean, in the broader sense, is it something that you incorporate and that you choose? To what extent is it something that you choose, and to what extent is it something that you pursue actively? Something over there. And I'm not passing any kind of judgment. People should be free to do whatever they want. And even if I were against anything, there's no authoritative anyone. People are free to make up their own minds and follow their hearts and their guts and their souls. It's a nice mixture of all of them, as far as I'm concerned. So I brought up the gays here because there are certain people who get sent away. There are certain people who get sent away and they need to wait, and then they are welcomed back in once they have achieved alignment. Now, I'm not about to suggest that you can that sexual orientation is out of line and you need to realign. I'm not about to do that. I'm not even a big fan of the word straight, because it implies that all other ways are awkward or wayworthy or whatever the term might be, that it's not straight. For someone who is born that way, as they see it, it's not a question of choice at all. This is who I am, period. So that's the straight line for me. It's my straight path. And you can make that argument, sure. I'm not here to debate that either. Luckily, I've never needed to. I believe in, individual freedom, pretty much. Oop, wait, did I not knock over? No. So they send them away from the camp. And I think that there are times when you need to enforce the law. And I think that were it the case that there was a divine court now, made up of people, right? Of righteous people, sages, anointed, or those who had their hands laid on them as Moses did on Joshua, that whole thing. If we had a court like that, which existed for many years, I think that many, many things would be different. I do. Orthodox Judaism would love to believe that things would be, maybe not exactly, that things would be just as they were, and that Orthodox Judaism has barely changed. And hey, maybe. Certainly halakha has been advancing, but it has not changed. The 13 attributes according to which you decree halacha, Jewish law, Hebrew law, have not changed. So, you always draw upon the past because we don't have an authoritative court to rule and to decree and to make any judgments that apply to the people at large. So it's something that's difficult to kind of think about. It's difficult to think about, but I want to say this, regardless of any court, let's take the gays as an example. I find that for lack of a court and prophets and all those things that communicate to us the will of God at any given moment in here and now, the Torah is filled with laws. It's filled with verses. I recently gave the example of the commandment to set a slave free on the 7th year. After 6 years, you set a slave, a Hebrew slave or handmaid, you set them free. You must. It is a commandment. Does that mean that we should all acquire slaves, buy slaves, purchase them, however it's done, in order to, and from our own people, no less, just so we can fulfill that commandment? Or is it better to live in a world where there is no slavery and where people are free? Because slavery, if you read any kind of tradition and oral tradition especially, the idea of the slave is somebody who is not obligated to fulfill any commandments, and a lot of things don't apply to him because he is not a master of his own self. He has another master for now. Does that mean that we should then bring that back and have slaves? I mean, bona fide slaves for 6 years and then set them free? Hell, for all I know, there are some religious BDSM people who do this very thing. That's interesting. But there are some commandments that I follow, and I personally, I'm not talking about any kind of religion, I follow. I consider them to be more sacred, more important to me. Are they more sacred or more important? Probably not, because the Torah is infinite, and this is just the physical manifestation of it. But I do pick and choose. I cherry pick all the time, and I choose to cherry pick. In the context of the gays, I choose love. I choose embracing over sending them away, because for many reasons, I think I should give this precedence. I should give embracing them precedence, and I can afford to do this because I'm my own individual, and I don't represent anyone but myself, so I can afford to say this. Orthodox rabbis and other men of faith and women of faith, I assume, who feel they represent a certain kind of way, be it rigid or not, they feel they need to represent it in the best possible way, by adhering to any kind of strictness. And I understand why many religious people are fundamentally against gays and homosexuals especially. I get it. And I don't get it. So the gay parade, the gay pride parade, gay pride march happened in Jerusalem. I've never been. I don't rule out going. There are times when we need to send people away for different reasons. Something they brought on themselves, something that's a natural part of life. And I just gave the gays as an example. This applies to so many other situations and walks of life. It's a very, to send people away from a community is a very large thing, especially when you're a tribal community. But even when you're not tribal, you have a close group of people who identify however they want to identify as a group. To be sent away from there can be very tragic and very traumatic. It can happen on the familial level or on the community or national level, I suppose, or the camp of these wandering tribes as they were going through the desert, and they would send out these people and welcome them back in with open arms when they were pure again. And by pure, I mean physically pure, ritually clean, spiritually able to experience a certain thing which was barred from them before. It's not a question of good or bad. It's not a question of good or bad. And here's why. If it's something that's a natural part of life, it's not a question of good or bad, because it's going to happen and we're all going to die. All of us, every single one of us is going to experience death. Things that you do in regards to yourself, it may manifest in the form of a skin disease, biblical leprosy, but it's something that you did. You with yourself affected other people For sure. That's why you're being cast away to a certain extent. And it's also, and this is important, that it was catching these diseases. The biblical leprosy was catching. Right now it eludes me. It escapes me. It escapes me if the blood was also the gushing of blood, if it was catching or not. No, I don't think it was. No, but you would get others defiled. I'm rambling a little bit. I need to go very soon. Thank you if you made it this far. I think we should choose to embrace people before we choose to uh, excommunicate them. This doesn't apply in every single possible scenario. Obviously, there are exceptions to the rule. But I think that in this day and age, and I don't mean turn the other cheek in a Christian kind of way. I don't mean it like that. But I do mean, as the older courts did, try and find merit in that individual whom you want to bring judgment to, speak judgment to, and exert judgment on, or if that's the right word. Consider the human. Consider the Hebrew man or woman that's before you, or if it's not, then the person that's before you. Before you take this book of the Torah and you wave it and you smack them with it. There is a time to do that. I'm not saying no, everything's cool, everything's accepted. I'm just saying that remember that they would welcome them back. And let's try and do that as soon as we can, to try and find a bridge somehow that we can help bring people back, not to the straight and narrow that we perceive to be straight and narrow, but to the greater straight and narrow, righteousness, which transcends the physical. And it's a dangerous line, but I believe there is such a thing. Let's have a wonderful Sabbath, a wonderful weekend. It's Shavuot, Pentecost, right? The holiday of the giving and receiving of the Torah. So just a quick word on that. It's an honor and a privilege to re-welcome the Torah into my life every year as anew. Whether it's now when we were married to the Most High, or whether it's on the 8th day of Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, when we literally start the Torah from Genesis. But this is the different one. This is the wedding day. I love weddings. I really, really do. And this is one where I want to play the part. I want to be the female, the feminine, the higher feminine, the lower feminine. The Tao Te Ching says that you need to incorporate more of the feminine into your being if you want to be on top. You need to go to the bottom and be able to receive in order to be on top. And that in her silence, the feminine overcomes the masculine. Look it up. Good Shabbos. This has been a lot of fun. Also, I made a Q&A a short while ago. If you want, check that out. Rest. Blessings.